thank you so much for joining me for today's video. It still baffles me that non-writers think that writing a book is easy. Those of us who are actually in the business know that that's not even remotely the case, and we all know that the first book is the hardest. But why is this? Let me break it down for you and see if I can help some of you new writers make the process a little easier. Reason number 1, motivation matters. Most people who start writing books when they've never expressed an interest in the craft before do so for 2 reasons: money and fame. They assume that what happened to J.K. Rowling happens to every writer. And they think they can make their first mill by putting that wet dream they had last week onto paper. But let's face it, even people who are destined to be writers are guilty of falling into this mindset, even if that mindset was brief. But as is true with the rest of life, money is not good long-term motivation to make you do something that's hard or something you don't like. If you don't find a love for your craft and your story, you're eventually going to say, "No mansion is worth this," and give up. Change the mindset and you'll pull through. Reason number 2, bad advice. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, of bad writing advice out there. Between the internet and pompous higher education teachers, it's rampant. We have all heard shitty writing advice. Now, don't get me wrong, there is also great advice for writers. Notice that I said advice for writers, not writing advice. There is in fact a difference. Send a copy of your manuscript to yourself to act as poor man's copyright? Good advice. Write 3 books a month to stay relevant? Bad advice. Read? Good advice. Don't publish your book for 10 years because it's obviously a burner book? Bad advice. The long and short of it is that writing advice sucks for a couple of reasons. 1, it usually comes from someone who has never tried to write a book. 2, it comes from someone who has written a book, but it was unsuccessful in the long term and they don't want anyone to be more successful than them. And 3, one size does not fit all. You have to ignore the advice you find if it's from the first 2 kinds of people. As for the last one, I encourage you to try and listen to what other writers have to say, but don't expect it to work a miracle. It may not work for you. Yeah, I said in one of my videos that tabletop RPGs really help writers, but if you don't like playing tabletop RPGs, it's not really going to help. Piggybacking off of this point, reason number 3, copying the masters. A lot of people assume that people who have written a lot of books that are New York Times bestsellers have advice and tips that will make anyone a New York Times bestseller. Remember when I said that one size doesn't fit all? It applies here too. Take Stephen King. This guy is consistently writing 6 pages a day and doesn't seem to have that little voice of an editor in the back of his head saying that every word he's just written sucks. The rest of us are still wondering how this is possible. On the other hand, there's George R.R. Martin. He's writing his book on a word processor from the 80s and he doesn't actually type. He still does hunt and peck. Just because someone is a successful writer doesn't mean that their process will work for you. So stop copying them and asking why it's doing no good. Again, piggybacking off of this point. Reason number 4, you're technically writing 2 books at once. The story you actually want to tell is your first book. Your own personal creative writing for dummies guide is the second book. You have to figure out what works for you all the way down to how you actually write the book. Type on a computer or on a typewriter, or go with good old-fashioned longhand with a pen and paper. These are all different ways to write a book. In fact, Barbara Cartland, the romance writer, managed to pump out over 500 books in 67 years by dictating her books to secretaries who wrote them down in shorthand and then translated them. She said this method was less ponderous. And you have to figure this out all by yourself, all through trial and error. You'll never know if a method works until you try it. And if the writing method that works for you doesn't exist, you have to create it from scratch. That takes a long time, and until it's done, writing will feel like trying to swim through quicksand. And reason number 5, fear. Doing anything that's a big deal for the first time or even times after that is scary. Writing a book is no exception. It's scary to invest so much time into something that might not make a lot of money, if any money at all. It's scary when you hit writer's block for the first time and it keeps you down for a long time. It's scary to allow anyone to take a look at your book because plagiarism is so rampant. It's scary to let anyone else see your book for critique. It's scary to publish for the first time. It's scary. The whole process is scary. And fear can keep you down, hold you back, and slow the process. I'll not begrudge anyone for feeling afraid because I have been afraid. But I hope that you all learned that we were all afraid in the beginning. And we got over it because we had a desire to finish what we started and do what we love. And that love and that desire outweighed the fear. You can overcome the fear too. So that's all I have for you today. Starforged Orion is still available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, and is also available on Barnes & Noble's website. My play How Are You is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And go ahead and check out my Patreon if you want to come up with more ways to support me. I'm just saying you can become a beta reader if you want to. And don't forget to check out my other social media sites if you want more content. Toodles!